Okay, it's 9 o'clock. We are so privileged this morning to have Maureen Rock with us. She is director of the Adventist Discovery Centre for the UK and for Ireland. And her presentation this morning is about serving with volunteers. Maureen, up to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And I want to say it's just so wonderful to just see you all on screen again. And I really pray that what we cover today will give us a chance to look again at the way in which we serve within our local churches. As the title has mentioned, serving with volunteers. Fellow ministers on the screen are obviously conscious of the fact that we spend our time serving with people who are all volunteering into the work of God. But how do we develop them? Do they need further development? Who is responsible for that development? Those are the sort of points I'd like to just briefly share. This will by no means be a complete fix-it presentation. It's just let us stop and reflect for a moment. So there are 4 really short points I would want to cover with you. And under there are some subpoints as well. One is that looking at local leaders as our volunteers, followed by the challenges and the effect that those challenges can have on us when we serve with volunteers. We'll look very briefly at some Bible learning, and I will want to share with you some suggested solutions. As I share this presentation, I really want to encourage us all to think about this particular point. Pastors are professionally and academically trained for their roles. Local leaders, on the other hand, may be required to undertake pastoral roles in the absence of a pastor. How do we prepare them for that? Well, traditionally within the Adventist Church, our local leaders are usually, this role is predominantly undertaken by male members of a senior age who held their position for a very long time. And they're excellent at what they do. So I need us to bear that in mind and acknowledge them for the work that they've done in our local church. But in recent years, and due to cultural as well as legislative influences, the person of local leader can now be male or female, and they can be elected from a much wider age range, which is good for our churches, really excellent. But church members who hold prominent positions in the local community, coupled with years of experience in a variety of management and supervisory roles, they could also find themselves selected as a local leader without undergoing church-based leadership training or schooled even in the requirements of their role. So when we choose individuals to take up these roles, I wonder whether or not we probably pay so much more attention to one element of 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1-7. We kind of lay on verse 7 really heavily. And that's the part that says an elder or a local leader must have a good testimony among those who are outside, or that's outside of the church, lest he or she falls into reproach and the snare of the devil. Why am I using that as a focus? Well, let me share with you a few responses given by individuals who responded positively when asked by their local church to volunteer as an elder. So the first example, the first sample that I received when I asked individuals about this, one elder shared that 3 years after baptism, she was invited to take up the role of elder. She was excited about it, but she later found out that one of the points discussed in relation to her nomination was that she held a prominent position in the local community. I'm not saying they didn't pray about this particular individual's appointment, but this was further emphasized, she shared, when she requested training as an elder. The elder pointed out that though she had held a senior position outside of the church, she felt there was a need for her to undergo formal leadership training in a church setting. This was a good few years ago, so we've made some changes since. Local leaders are often, as I said, well thought of in the by outsiders, though not schooled in the requirements of the role. And sadly, at the time when this individual was appointed, there was no such facility available as in developing her to take up a leadership role. Here's a second example. An interview that was carried out at the Elders Digest in response to a question on what new information was gleaned from reading the journal. One elder gentleman said, "Not having had any formal training on how to conduct myself as a local leader, there were certain aspects of church protocol which I assumed would be the same as the protocols practiced in business. However, I soon realized," he continues, "that the business ethic of winner, loser does not transfer well to the church situations." And he continued, "I also found that conducting board meetings, because the church he was an elder in, they did not have a pastor for a while and he had to take the lead. He said, I found that conducting board meetings was a challenge as I had to stop viewing the board members as employees. All because we had not given him the training that he needed." And here's a third example, third and final one. This pastor shared that prior to ministry, she had served for a number of years in the local church as an elder. And all of that was without training. But what she did add is that having attended a class, remember she's now serving as a pastor, and having attended a class on pastoral care in the seminary, she recognized the need for training her elders. So it is sometimes assumed that leadership skills developed and practiced in the workplace equip our members to serve in the role of church elder. Now, this can be true in some professions. I'm not disputing that, but it's not the same for all. Our members and even our pastors and our Bible workers receive a salary. However, our local leaders and our church members are all volunteers. How do we support these volunteers when we ask them to lead? Yes, they're our members, but we're placing them in a challenging situation sometimes. And each time there's a new pastor appointed, our local leaders are required to adapt to the new pastor's ministerial approach. Now, who trained them in handling change? Usually we don't cover that. Within the Seventh-day Adventist Handbook, it identifies that the work of elders are unique among church leaders. Totally agree with that. Totally agree that it is a unique role that we're asking them to take on. But it also follows that the elders' training sits squarely in the hands of the Ministerial Association Department. And this is fantastic because that work has been developing more and more, but unfortunately not everywhere. There are some places where there are still gaps. And here's where the gap comes in when we say, how do we continue to develop the local leaders? Having attended training with the Ministerial Association and having been given the guidance of what is expected of them, the practical element of the elder's role is within the local church, alongside the local pastor. So this is where we have a little bit of a challenge. So as a result, there is a need, as I said, for additional and continual development of elders within the local church. So hear me right, the Ministerial Association group is doing all that they can, but when the individuals reach back to the home church, that's where we stumble. So I'm focusing on this because the well-being of the pastors and the elders is really paramount to us delivering the work of the church. So there's this responsibility of leading people both inside and outside of the church places pastors and elders in a position of influence and trust. And they're all expected to love everyone, to also have integrity, intelligence, entrepreneurship, energy, and tact. All of these are required from people who we place to lead our churches. However, there's a major difference, as I said, in the preparation of those two roles. I've looked at how other denominations train their elders or even identify them. And in quite a few of them, all Christian denominations identify the elders and the pastors in two different roles. But I was really disappointed to find that in all of those different Christian denominations, although the pastors are thoroughly trained, there's no follow-up for the elders. So I'm waving a flag for elders here, and I'm so highlighting the fact that we need to give them a little bit more slack here and there. But there's also the fact that we are working with long-standing traditions within our work. And there are times when we need to review what we do and how it's affecting the people around us. So here's something that I've come across. As I say, in reviewing these different roles, I recognize that there are certain things that we would love to have our elders developed in. Team development, leading volunteers, seeking their own personal development, and also managing change. That is the problem we have, the biggest areas that we have challenges within. So this lack of organizational training, follow me, it's sometimes unintentionally neglected, because our elders always look so able and they get out there and they do the work, and there are gaps in their knowledge that we do not really consider. So let me go to the challenges and the effect. New church, new leadership team, brilliant. The scenario here is familiar to most of us on screen. The conference or the union presidents has called us and informed us that it's announced to us that we are moving to a local church, to a new church. So we're leaving the location where we probably have become comfortable and we're going on to somewhere else. I remember that we're talking about leaders who have come into our church with experience from the workplace. So a lot of our elders have brought a lot of skill sets into the church. So here you are as a pastor being asked to move to a new church, and you turn up and you're not welcome by the local elders. How does that happen? How does that come about? As a pastor myself, I count it a blessing to have served with elders from professional roles in county court, diplomatic field, transport management, building trade, nursing, community carers, business management, engineering, sports leadership, to name a few. IT specialists, teachers. These are the sort of people who lead, or who I met leading in the local churches where I was blessed to pastor in. Each of them brought some fundamentally different approaches to discipling the local congregation and reaching out to the community. And this afforded dynamic interactions and outcomes, as well as long-lasting friendships. So I still connect with almost everyone, in fact, know all the elders that I've ever served with. However, there's still a need for team development. I'm going to hammer this one home. There's dependency, awareness of each other's skills. We needed to look at that so that we can achieve as much as we were all professionals in our roles. But this said, there are numbers of pastors, male and female, who have entered into churches and districts and would continue to enter into churches and districts where they are not welcomed by the leadership team or the members. Do you know what my reaction to this tends to be when I hear that the incoming minister has received hostile behavior, verbal aggression, rejected ideas, their ideas put forward has been rejected, and even the direct negative reactions have been aimed at the minister and their families. You know what I stop and think about when I hear that? I ask myself, which work element, which work experience did they discover this skill set in? I often wonder where in the world of work was this skill set of rejecting a new leader was acquired. If we are appointing our leaders because they have the experience from the world of work, how do we hit this barrier? So what I want to share with you this morning about this well-being is to ask ourselves, is there more we need to do to help strengthen and encourage the leaders who we place in our local churches, to help develop them, to help grow them? How much more do we need to do on that? The Seventh-day Adventist handbook for elders actually says that the elders are responsible for every element of work within our church. And hear me right, I'm rooting for them, because if that's their responsibility, how do we prepare them beforehand for this? Have we identified these volunteer skills sufficiently? Have we really looked and see that their families and their lifestyles have actually going to be compromised when we place them in these leadership roles without training, without sufficient training? Let me add that, because I see our ministerial secretary on the screen and I know he does everything possible to get us shaped up for this. But are there things that we miss out on? There is a need, I believe, that we need to train our church leaders, or rather continually train our church leaders in handling change, role modeling, and delivering care that's needed by the members and the local pastor. So the role modeling is really important. The way I behave in church will affect the people around me. The way my elders behave in church, well, my elders, the church elders behave, will affect the people around them. And if we cannot unite completely, it means that we are overloading our pastors and placing them in a situation of burnout. Because for whatever reason, that synergy that is required has not taken place. Why hasn't the synergy taken place? Is it because the pastor's not trained enough? Is it because the elder's not trained enough? We cannot point fingers on either one, but we need to ask ourselves, where are we missing out in encouraging this synergy in order to look after the well-being of both sides? Let me look very briefly at what some of the leaders in the field, or those writing in the field of leadership, have to say. Maxwell actually reflects that influencing and developing a team is the aim of seeing a team members as they are, in order to help them become what they can be. So we have the skill set, but have we honed it and shaped it? An opportunity for developing our local leaders and having been equipped and given authority may help them to serve effectively alongside our members in the congregation, where effective spiritual relationship has already been formed, and they can then report back to the pastors. You know, I tried that in a local church once. And we said to the elders, look, you know these families. We were in a church where there were 3 different generations within the one church. So many of them grew in that church. We said, you know the members, come alongside them and minister to them, and then come back and let me know how's it going. If you need help, let's talk about it. And in many churches, we don't do that. Rickard's actually said in the Dilemmas of Leadership, he said, this requires us to reframe our understanding of leadership as a collective rather than an individual activity. That is the key. Are we looking at how we can merge the two together so we do not hear the horror stories? We do not hear the frightening conversation that, as from a leader, be it a pastor or an elder, that they did not feel accepted or connected within that local congregation. How do we prepare our local leaders to lead? Preparing men and women for the role of elder, both before and after election, is one thing that I would recommend. And why do I say that? Because what we tend to do is each year or every 2 years, we hold what's called a nominating committee to identify who should lead. And I wonder, can we slow that down? Can we look and see, for the well-being of these individuals, identify this year who should be leading in 2 years' time? Not who should lead next month, but who should lead in 2 years' time. And then, having identified those individuals, work with them and develop them and come alongside them in a culture of learning so that they can be prepared. So in 2 years' time, they can slip into their role. And we continue developing them in the same way. Now, I know that might sound a little bit radical based on the way that we serve, but wouldn't it be wonderful if we could be training our local leaders now for 2 years down the road, rather than training them now because we've put a mantle on them and say, you are now our local leader. You see, it was Lincoln Felter who actually said, when he talked about leading cross-culturally, he mentioned that when a pastor say, my vision, the leader sets up a dichotomy between those who agree and follow and those who do not. The natural outcome of my vision is that it is different from her vision or his vision. And these differences cause division and conflict within our churches. So the perspective on this here is that the only vision worth following is God's vision. And let God reveal the vision that the church needs to take. So come together as one and say, what is God's vision? Not mine, yours, or ours, but what does God want from us? As I said, the need to prepare men and women for these expectations can sometimes be brushed aside, leaving them to draw on the talents that they have come in with, and we're asking them to deliver in a role that they were not fully trained to do. I love the comment made with regards to effective leadership. What it said, there seems to be a little correlation between a man's effectiveness and his intelligence. Should say a woman as well. This imagination or knowledge or intelligence, these are all required, but they only work, they're only effective when we convert them into results. So we need to bring all of it together. By themselves, all the imagination, all the intelligence, nor the knowledge on its own cannot give us results. We need to combine. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we did that with the volume of expertise we have around the table? All of that excitement that they came in with, all of that expertise that they have, tap into them and use that. Divide the work and share it among them. You know, I always say when I'm training individuals for leadership, I always say to them, the day you have to say, I am the leader, you've lost. You have stopped being the leader. This should be a joint work that we're doing together. No pastor needs to say, I am the pastor, so this is what we say. Or I am the first elder, and this is what we say. From the moment we do this, we have lost the plot. The leadership role has disappeared. So how can we mold all of this together? Rather than quoting a number of different external approaches to leadership, let's look at Jesus's ministry very briefly. It can be seen that in his selection of the disciples, this was not random. They all came from different backgrounds, but it was not randomly choosing, hey, you look good, you should be able to. We know from reading the Bible that each of the disciples brought with them transferable skills that they acquired in their workplace. So a fisherman has used this working all through the night and coming up at the end of it with no results. Hey, what a good person to place within a ministerial role. Keep searching. There may not be any results, but keep on fishing. How about the fact that Matthew, as a tax collector, knew how to keep records? because he can keep records, no one else had to worry about that. Let him do it. And we look at the Bible references and the Gospels, and you see Matthew's Gospel is really orderly because that's the skill set he brought. Whereas the other skill sets we looked at, John got carried away with the love and the excitement, and we love reading that. But his focus wasn't on the order, but was on the love experience and the spiritual experiences that he had with Jesus. Some of the skills, the secular skills and experiences that they had were drawn on by the master in their service with him. And we need to acknowledge as well that the experience that Jesus pulled out of them is what grew the church that we now lead. We are standing on these guys' shoulders. What have they learned? I love Ellen White's comment with regards to in The Desire of Ages, where she said, Jesus chose unlearned fishermen because they had not been schooled in the traditions and erroneous customs of their time. They were men of native ability, and they were humble and teachable, men whom he could educate for his work. I think we're hearing more in the importance of teaching, of continued development. And Jesus developed his disciples by allowing them to acquire experiential knowledge as they witnessed his teachings and his healing action. First he taught them, then he sent them. So I want to take us very quickly to some suggested solutions. I wouldn't be able to give you too much details on it, but I will just take you through very briefly. Number one, intentional elders meeting. This is for developing the local leaders. Okay, the purpose of the elders meeting is to predominantly to review the church's evangelism planning and develop support structures for the members. But its recommendation here is that why don't we take time in the elders meetings to develop a safe environment where the elders can actually share with each other and connect with one another. This needs to be a space where the team members can safely share their current spiritual and physical needs. And this activity can, in turn, help lead the pastor to understanding where there may be challenges coming. I remember the first time I said to my elders, put away the agenda. How are you doing? And there was absolute silence in the room. I said, no, forget the agenda. How are you doing? What's happening in your life today? And it took a while before that ice could be broken. And suddenly we were able to build from supporting one another and then supporting the local church. How about valuing the elders' expertise? Whatever they bring, let's use it. Let us grow on it. Are they good at event management? Hey, let them do that bit. Are they good at IT and at using Zoom? Let them do it. Step back. The pastor does not have to do everything. I remember being taught in seminary, we need to be the elder, not be the leader, not do the work, but be the work. That doesn't mean we don't work, but we need to actually be able to show the examples as well. How about involving the elders in an effective problem solving and conflict management? They know the congregation better than some of us do, because some of them grew up in there. And very often, because of that, they can run ahead and start trying to solve problems. And I try and encourage them to say, wait a minute, what's going on here? Let us stop and pause. What is going on? What is meant to be going on? Why is it happening? What ought to be happening in the church? Put aside the problem. Let's pray about what does good look like. And now let's come back and say, how might we respond to the challenge? That's Osmond's theological approach to solving problems. Really ideal to use that. So I will leave that at this point and just want to say to us, one of the things that we need to bear in mind is that because our local leaders are volunteers, we need to continually focus, and I say we, I'm talking those who's leading at the front, who are leaders of the church. We need to encourage them, stand with them, support them. But we also need to recognize that we currently need elders and local church leaders who can transition from a church with a building to a Zoom service, back to a church with a building and a Zoom service. Do we have leaders at the moment who can do that? Do we need to review and rethink the leadership teams that we have in our local churches now? Can we move on from where we are based on the situation of our churches? Can we move forward with the same leaders we had prior to this virtual approach to ministry? Can we take those same ones forward, or do we need a whole new approach to leadership within our local churches? And how are we going to develop them? Finally, who is responsible for developing them? That's what I wanted to share with you today with regards to looking after the well-being of ourselves as ministers and our local leaders. Thank you.